Hi, Jessica here with Moxie Malas, Peacefully Untamed. So I create crystal healing and aromatherapy jewelry, but every single piece has a specific intention and meaning behind it based on the stones and the crystals that are used. So we'll kind of talk about that today.
And I'm Lana Anderson, and I am the studio owner of Yoga by Blisstopia. We offer all kinds of yoga classes, from prenatal yoga, hot yoga, restorative yoga, gentle yoga, and we also offer energy work, so healing touch and Reiki, and then many different types of workshops, from Ayurveda to healing the self to meditation classes and workshops too.
I am Dr. Tom Pastor. I'm a doctor of chiropractic. I use the most recent in brain, body, and behavior science to help people get to the bottom of what's really going on with their health so they can take action that works for them and feel better. And we are going to start today's conversation by talking about intentions. So Jessica is going to take the lead here because she's got some really awesome things that she talks about with her jewelry and the intention behind them, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, awesome. So I think one of the biggest things that happens when we start to talk about intention, particularly with what I do with the jewelry, is that people don't even know exactly, or they're unsure, I should say, of what intention they should focus on or where to even start, because it can be kind of super overwhelming, right? When we think about, well, what do I want to create in my life? What intentions do I need to focus on to get there? And when I teach my workshops, I walk people through sort of a very specific experience in order to dig a little bit deeper into those intentions. And a lot of things that I use are more of like assessment to kind of see where you're at. So I read the book Code of the Extraordinary Mind by Vishen Lakhiani. Amazing book. And he has this awesome outline of the 12 areas of life that we should have balance in. So I love to start people with that because it's a very kind of concrete, okay, yes, I can see, I can tick off the boxes, I can rate it from 1 to 10. And then you get to see, okay, well, what areas in your life need a little more attention right now in order to find that balance. And then taking it beyond just that, I use a lot of the energy work with chakras and the different systems, energy systems in the body, but then also working with the 4 desires of the soul according to yogic tradition, right? And so we kind of bring in, what are these 7 chakras and what areas of our life do they have to do with? And then we do a little intuition exercise that has to do with the 4 desires of the soul, because our soul is really longing for these 4 things. And when we listen to our heart and we listen to our intuition, it allows that intention to step forward a little bit more clearly. And then where I come in too is the stones and crystals, and then we create a beautiful talisman that helps to focus and, like you said, keep your mind on that specific intention. So that's kind of the process, but yeah.
What are the 4 desires? I forget, you said them and I found them very intriguing before, but I don't remember what they are.
Yeah. So the 4 desires, you have kama, which is a desire for beauty, but beauty by way of joy, bliss, inspiration, the things that really make your heart sing, right? And then arta, which is our soul's desire for our needs to be met. So this could be financial needs, this could be time, energy, support, emotional support. Then we have moksha, which is freedom, our soul's desire for freedom, liberation, anything that is holding us back from living our fullest expression of our life. So that's kind of where like peacefully untamed comes from, is, you know, letting go of anything that's holding you back. And then dharma. Our soul has a desire for dharma, purpose. And that is one I feel like that people get really kind of caught up on, is what is my purpose in life, right? So I like to just talk about how it doesn't have to be one specific thing, right? And it doesn't have to stay the same thing your whole life. I have a lot of people who say to me like, oh, you're so lucky you found your purpose, because I have a business that is passion driven, right? And like, it was like, oh, I stumbled upon my purpose, you know, like, oh, you're so lucky you tripped on it and found it. You know, it's like, it's not necessarily that. It's, our purpose is what we put our intentions into and what we focus on and what we put our energy and ourself behind. And that can evolve as we evolve, you know. So those are the 4 desires in a teeny nutshell. There's so much more. Yeah.
So then, Lana, we had discussed a little bit how you lead into your yoga classes with just a talk of set your intention at the beginning. What have you found is just a good way to prompt that in people? What are the intentions people usually focus on? What do you find as people are going into yoga?
So I always create the setting to observe first. So you can't just go, oh, my intention is going to be more patient. Well, you just jumped into it. How do you know that's really what you need at the moment? So we need to quiet ourselves first, silence the chatter, silence society's what we think we're supposed to be doing, and actually go inward and see what's happening with the physical body, see what's happening with the emotional layers, see what's happening with the spiritual layers. So we need to quiet all of that and start to listen to see where we're at right now in order to see where we want to be. So where are we at right now at this very, very moment, not thinking back about 5 years ago, but right now, what's going on this immediate moment? And then once we can tune into that and find some clarity, then words start to pop in that really make sense. Like, oh, I need to release some fear around an injury that I had. Or I need more patience because I'm really fidgety in my body right now. Because you stopped and actually listened to what's happening instead of just rushing into an intention that we're supposed to be doing. So that's the first component of it. Once we tune in, I always say, who do you want to be on your mat right now? During this practice, who do you want to be? What does it look like? What does it feel like? What does it sound like? What does it taste like? So we get all of those senses in, because an intention is about this physical realm that we're in. So we need to really tap into every sense to really deepen it, to get stronger in it. So sometimes they even have people imagine, like, if you had a color crayon box next to you, like pick up a couple colors or a color, and in your mind's eye, what would you draw on your mat today? What does that look like? Do you want to be a warrior? So maybe you draw black warrior on it with armor, and all it takes is 30 seconds to do that, to create a different practice. And then when we start to breathe into that practice, then that deepens it more. And Dr. Tom, you probably can talk about the physiological part of that too. But the energetic part, bringing that prana or that life force into the body with an intention, all the cells, to me, this is energetically how I think about it, is they're like dancing around like, oh, you want me to be a warrior? And then the other cells are like, hey, yeah, you're a warrior. We're going to be warriors together. Let's bring the other warriors in, from the digestive system, from the liver to the brain. And they all start to go, yeah, let's do that. Because they're listening. You quiet it enough to actually have them listen. And then when we start to do the pranayama, the breath, and then the movement, the asana practice, then everything starts to just gel at a deeper level. And then when you get off of the mat, you can more effortlessly bring that into the world. And I don't know about you, but I love effortless. I don't want to have to work really hard for something. So when it just flows with the nature's rhythm, with your intention, I think everyone wants that.
Absolutely.
Sorry, I was right on my mat, like teaching right there. So if I wasn't looking at, you guys.
No, I do that all the time. I totally zone into like what I'm talking about, so I just glaze.
I love it.
Follow-up question for that. with so much noise going on, with people being so used to that constant noise, that constant stream of music and of color and of advertisement and of motion, do you find it difficult to get people to just sit in some still and look for an intention, or does it tend to come easy?
I think it's really hard for most people. It's very, very hard. So even if they can get just one word, it doesn't have to be a whole elaborate system, because that can be overwhelming, because we are tapped with so much information and so much to our senses that it can be overwhelming for people. And then, of course, what do? Do nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Or they get scared, or they pull away, or they run away. So I think just helping them make it simple. It doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be a flow chart. It doesn't have to be any of that. Jessica?
I think that, yeah, even though it is very hard to find that quiet and that still, especially if people are not used to doing that, I think, or they're not practiced with it. Even if you've practiced with it, there's good days or easier days and harder days. I'm not gonna say good or bad, but easier and harder to find that stillness. That being said, I think that there are a lot of people who are so hungry for it that they are open to the tools and the practices that will get them there, right? Yeah, like they want it, they need it. Well, I mean, it's part of us is to listen to our soul, and I think with all the noise that we get distracted. But I find that when I'm referring to my workshops just because that's my most experience with people right now, is helping people get intentions is through that. I find with those people, they're very open to the process and very open to learning any techniques to get there, especially finding that stillness as a technique, right? Yeah.
And that's where like a regular meditation practice comes in.
Absolutely.
As well, because it does get easier, I think, when
you
sit for 5 minutes, 10 minutes. There again, it doesn't have to be like a Buddhist monk, sitting for 6 hours in a particular position. It can just be going to the bathroom during your lunch break at work and just taking 5 minutes and closing the door and closing your eyes and just moving inward. There again, it doesn't have to be a complicated process. It can be something that's really simple that you filtrate into your lifestyle.
Right.
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, well, that's like anything that you practice, right? Creating that muscle memory and creating that, your body's and your mind are getting used to it the more you do it. Yeah. So
Well,
yeah.
that's what a lot of the research behind, a lot of the more formal research behind meditation is really showing that is the sweet spot. And it is the practice of teaching yourself to focus, because with so many distractions, like I was talking about earlier, a lot of people have lost the ability to really hone in and focus on something for more than a couple of seconds, because so often we're required to switch from thing to thing to thing to thing, that we're kind of programming ADD into ourselves by always having to switch like that. So the practice of sitting and focusing, whether it's on your breath or on something in front of you or a project that you have to work on or your intention for something, it's a habit. It's a thing that you need to practice at this point, because with so many distractions, we just aren't practiced at it anymore. We're not practiced at focusing on something long enough to really ponder over it. But there's actually, I heard recently of a good exercise for kind of beginning with intention, beginning with whether something feels good or bad, because there are a lot of choices, particularly we as entrepreneurs run into, where this could be really good for my business, but it might not feel right. And actually, I think I heard it from Marie Forleo. And one of the things she says that you can use your body for is just if you're thinking about something and it's because excitement and fear are kind of the same response. So you could be getting excited because it's something that could really drive you forward, or you could be getting afraid because it's something dangerous. And she says, when you feel that kind of rush, see where your body leans. If you lean in, like if you naturally kind of lean in or naturally kind of open to it, then that's something that you're excited about because it's going to be good, because it's really going to drive you forward. Whereas if you feel yourself pulling back or you feel yourself closing a little bit, that's a pretty good instinctual, like your body responding to, this is a threat. Like, this isn't something that's going to be good. This is something that, even though it might, have a couple of elements where you think, okay, maybe this would be good. If you find yourself shrinking back from it, if you find yourself pulling away, that's just a really quick gauge for how your body's feeling about that action.
And that goes back into tying into your intuition then too, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and what is intuition but your subconscious? Like only 3 or 5% of the processes that go on in our body at any given moment actually come to the level of conscious awareness. The other 95, 90%, 97% are subconscious. They're body functions. They're things we're filtering out because we just don't need to pay conscious attention to them. So that's all intuition, or at least that's how I've taught myself to trust my intuition as problems letting go
going on
things is, it's that other 97% of the things that you're doing. And when you really start to be able to tune into what your body's doing, then that is your intuition. I mean, that when you start to trust that your body, your subconscious observes things faster than your conscious mind will ever process them. So if you're drawn to something, if you feel yourself physically pulled to something, maybe let yourself explore it. And that can go with any intention or any choice.
Yeah. Very cool.
And then actually, so Lana kind of led me in earlier, and I didn't pull back to it. So she led me in a little earlier, some of the physiology of intention setting. So now seems like a good time to venture into that. So there's this whole part of your brain. I think it's the reticular activating system, if we really want to go scientific with it. But the whole point of this part of your brain, of your brainstem, one of the oldest parts of your brain, is to decide what you focus on, to decide what gets your attention. And what's very interesting about this part of your brain is that you can steer what it thinks. You can steer where it goes with some skill. And sometimes that can be meditation, it can be repetition. But something that all three of us have talked about in conversation before is when people take ownership of a disease or a disorder. You hear this particularly commonly now with my anxiety, my ADD, my fibromyalgia. Those are things that people tend to take ownership of. They tend to say it's mine, and they tend to say it a lot. And the more you repeat this, the more you activate that whole process in your reticular activating system, the more you activate that part of your brain to look for signs that you're anxious, or to look for signs that you're in chronic pain, or to look for signs that you can't focus on something. And the more you repeat it, the better ingrained that whole thought process becomes in your body. The easier it is and the more efficient it becomes. And this is where setting intention can have some really cool effects on the physical level, because the more you say the opposite, the more you start disrupting that pattern of owning a disease or a disorder or something that you consider negative in your life, the less efficient that part of your brain will become at making that thing true. So if you say constantly, I'm anxious, then your body will always look for the evidence that you're anxious. Will always look for the evidence that is your story, that is your narrative. And it will constantly reinforce it, and it will continue to add to those physiologic responses too. It'll continue to make it more efficient for you to produce cortisol and adrenaline in response to things, because you're an anxious person, which means naturally you produce these things more and you get more easily triggered. Whereas one of the really cool sets of research that's coming around for anxiety is reframing that response. So rather than telling yourself to calm, which is actually very inefficient for somebody who's so up all the time, rather than saying, okay, I need to calm down, I need to get myself under control, you actually lean into it and you say, you know what, I'm excited. I'm not anxious about this opportunity to speak. I'm just excited for it, because those responses are so similar and so easy to reframe and change around in your brain and in your body. So you can just lean into it. And that is the definition of setting an intention. I mean, my intention is not that I'm going to be anxious about this video that I'm creating. It is, I am super excited to see what this turns out to be. I'm excited to see who sees this and who it helps. It's a shift of intention. And I think that's one of the cool things about setting an intention at the beginning of a yoga practice, or going in and having just an experience in finding a piece of jewelry that was made with a very unique intention for you to focus on. Because whether you believe in, you know, crystals or chakras or energy work, I mean, even the simple process of knowing that you're wearing something that was made with the intention of promoting your own personal power. Yeah, I am fearless. Or the one that I'm wearing is
I am powerful.
right. And just saying that story, having that constant little reminder every time you look at your wrist, oh, I am powerful. I mean, imagine if you look at your wrist, because I have it right beside my watch. So every time I look at my watch, it is oh yeah, that's the intention of that bracelet. That's the intention of what I said. So whether there's actual energy work happening or not, you're still looking at something. You're still seeing, oh, the intention of that is to own my power. The intention of that is to grow into power. And imagine if you see that dozens and dozens of times a day, how much of a groove that's going to start to make in your brain.
Well, and that's that shift that you're talking about. It's like, okay, so we have that reticular activating system was over here and you're trying to get it over here. Well, then now you have something to look at or to touch that's like over here, like retraining.
Exactly.
And that goes back to like what Lana's talking about too, is just practice, you know, right. Repetition. Mm-hmm.
You know, and with anxiety, I have my own story around it, and being a mental health professional as well. Anxiety, absolutely, if you pay attention to it and keep constantly saying, I have anxiety, it can lead to other issues like agoraphobia. And then all of a sudden you go from having one anxiety bout to not even going out of your house because of that constant focus on that, instead of focusing on, like Dr. Tom, you said, is leaning into it and saying, I'm excited about this. And, you know, absolutely, there's all kinds of physiological stuff that happens. But if we just retrain our brain to look at it in a different way, and then have like a bracelet to focus on, it can change people's lives. I mean, it's powerful. It's not just a joke, you know, like, oh, right. It's easy to do. But it's also a choice that we make, and we can choose something different each and every time that something like that happens when we have anxiety. It's that choice to make it right now when we're experiencing that negative feeling that we might be having. My sister, we were on vacation, just a quick little story, but she's had migraines for a long time. So she jokes that she's the weather girl, because every time it rains, which it's actually raining right now, she says she gets a migraine. And I said to her, I said, well, who would you be without your migraines? Mm-hmm. Who would you be without those? And she's like, oh, damn it. Right?
You had to go there, right?
Then you have to think about it. Then you have to think about it and not just choose that I'm the weather girl again, because that's just the way it is. Choose something different and ask yourself the questions.
Mm-hmm. Right. You know what that reminds me of? So one of the exercises I've given people when I help work with them for anxiety, because what I do as a chiropractor, I help them just release some of the physical stress associated with it. And there's really a lot you could go into with the difference between physical and mental. Really, I think it's all just a matter of perspective. But I work a lot with physically releasing some of the physical tension that's being held in their body. But when I'm doing that, I'm talking to them about some of this reframing. And one of the tools that I give that kind of reminded me of, as far as just a good pattern interrupt. And I usually, the reason I always get that response of, damn it, is if you stop using the word. So this is something that was very successful. I'm thinking of one person in particular, but it's helped a couple, where every time the word comes up, particularly with anxiety, every time the word anxiety comes up or the word anxious comes up, you're no longer allowed to use it. And this was actually really cool for one of my patients, but you're just no longer allowed to use it. So even if you get halfway through and you go, my avocado, like just noticing how many times you say it in a day, and noticing all of those things and forcing yourself to replace it with anything else. It doesn't even have to make sense. Doesn't have to be doesn't even have to be one of the reframing into excitement or anything like that. It just has to be noticing the number of times that you take ownership of, I'm the weather person. Every time it rains, I get a headache. That's the narrative that she says. Same thing with this person. It was just, my anxiety is holding me back. My anxiety is causing these things. And I'm guilty of this too. I dealt with that tremendously when I opened my practice a few years ago. Where that was just, it was my pattern. I'm stressed. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm anxious. And I mean, my blood pressure shot up by like 20 points. I gained about 20 pounds worth of weight. Like my whole narrative was, I don't know what I'm doing and I'm anxious about it. And just noticing the number of times that I said that. And for this woman in particular too, noticing the number of times that she said my anxiety as an excuse for something. And then when you really notice it, like I cannot not hear it anymore when other people say the words my anxiety, because I trained myself so acutely that I don't get to say that about myself anymore. So it's been very interesting, just even that simple language shift and how much that kind of intention shift can really cause change and really disrupt a pattern that you might have let yourself get set in.
So I think what I'm wondering right now is we've had a lot of really good discussion about intentions and different things that keep us from creating intention, right? So now I would like to propose the question of what is the one biggest thing that you feel like people can do to create that intention, right? Or to start to refocus. I know you kind of touched on it a little bit with the anxiety example, but I'd love to ask both you and Lana. Or like, what is one thing that somebody can keep in mind when they're starting to create intention?
To be honest, all of my answers come up to reinforcing intention. I don't know that I have a good practice for finding initial intention.
Yeah.
I'd actually be fascinated to hear what both of you have to say about the initial finding of one. But a lot of times for me, people come into me because I'm a provider. People come to me with an intention. They come with to some degree. And I mean, a lot of times when somebody comes in with a symptom, their symptom is really, it's just a symptom. Like the actual source thing is a little different. So I have to do a little bit of teasing out of what that might be. But a lot of times an intention just kind of reveals itself between the two of us, like whether it's I observe something or they say it. And actually, I think it really is that interaction when I'm working with a patient, is that interaction of they say something and I say, wait a second there. Like that, I think that might be one of the root things. And then I just teach them how to reinforce it.
Sure.
So I think that might, I think I kind of stumbled into that answer. That is how I do it.
Yeah, right there it was.
Yeah. Hey, look.
Yeah. What about you, Lana?
I think what popped into my head, and I don't know if this addresses the specific question is, but so I have a team. I have employees that I work with, and they send goals every day. And it's not just goals, right? Since we talked about intention, it's more about your intention. And then everything with the intention the numbers fall in place under that. So the overall big intention for our employees is, how do you want people to feel around you on that day? Do you want them to feel empowered? Do you want them to, and of course we can't make anyone feel any way, but when we create that aura around ourselves, we're all one, right? So it will spill over to other people. So that's what I do with intentions with my team.
Cool.
Awesome. So daily practice of it.
Yeah.
That actually, I was going to lead into a question for that, for what you kind of do daily. I mean, I started every morning as part of my morning routine. I sit down, I have a cup of coffee while everything is still quiet, because I get up at 5 before everybody else is awake, because I like the quiet first thing. I like that kind of slow drive into the day. And I use that time. I do just a quick little 5-minute journal thing. And one of the biggest focuses of it is, what is my intention for the day? You can call it a main goal, you can call it an intention, you can call it a drive, you can call it whatever, but starting your day with this is my intention for today. And then all of those distractions that fly at you, all of those, and at least this is what I found with myself, is when I have that one intention, if that one intention is to connect with some more people that day, or to reinforce some old connections, or to meet up with some people, or to arrange meetings, which I actually usually spend a whole day doing now, is just reaching out to people and setting meetings with people. But if I know that that's my intention for the day, then that keeps me from getting distracted with these research black holes that I tend to get stuck in, because I can nerd out so hard on some different pieces of neurology. I know, it's so shocking. But I can get really involved in pieces of research. But if I know that my intention for that day was to do connections, was to reach out to people and to set up meetings, and to, because I mean, it is easy to spend a whole day doing that. Then I know that, okay, I have time set aside. And I think that's the biggest part of setting these intentions too, is knowing that there is time for those research binge things that I can go on, that I do have times where I get to do those things, or times where I get to relax. That's been another one too, is like, for me now, Sundays, my whole intention with Sunday is just don't plan it. So knowing that I have time for each of those things and setting my intention accordingly has been very, very helpful. So aside from Lana, you said you have people send their intent every day, which I think is a really cool way to encourage your team to have that practice and know for each other, know how to support each other in that.
Yep, and that's part of it. Yes,
that's huge.
So do you guys have any other practices for kind of getting that in the groove? I mean, I know even having, like I was mentioning with the bracelets, I mean, even having that intention, being able to constantly look there and see, oh, hey, that is part of my intention, my overall intention right now. You know, of any other kind of cool ideas or techniques or things for setting and reinforcing intention?
I really love the journaling aspect, and also combining what Lana said too with the quiet time. So in my mornings, I created a space in my room that's specifically for meditation and yoga and those practices. And so I've really started a new habit in the mornings of being quiet, without attachment, without expectation. I have 2 small boys and a business and a family. So there's a lot going on. So just to be able to stop and sit is really powerful, but also to let go of what that should look like or what should happen while I'm quiet. Like, I'm trying to just let come forward what needs to come forward. So I love finding the quiet for creating those intentions and letting them come forward. And I think one of the things that, if you don't mind me going on a tangent too, one of the things that I teach in the workshops is remember that when you are creating change, or because when we have intentions or a new intention, sometimes change is required, or when we have a new focus, to really be patient and kind to yourself while you're doing that. Because like you said too, these habits, these thoughts are ingrained, they're grooves in our brain, literally, they're hardwired to work that way, right? So as you're changing, just be patient and be kind, and try to practice that non-attachment. You know, I think that's the biggest thing too, is what it should look like. We have so many shoulds and we have tos and all this stuff. So it's like, just be gentle and patient and let it unfold.
It actually reminds me of something I read in a book called Meditation for Fidgety Skeptics. One of the things that he really reinforced, yeah, it was funny. But one of the things that he really reinforces in that book is exactly that be kind to yourself thing. Because if you sit down with a whole bunch of this should looks like this, and I should be good at this, and I should be following this. If you sit down to meditate, and every time you get distracted, you scold yourself, your brain starts to associate meditation with stress, and starts to associate meditation with not being good at something. And even if you're sitting down for 2 minutes and your whole intent is just to focus on your breathing for those 2 minutes, if rather than scolding yourself for drifting off, you reward yourself, or even if you just enjoy that you brought yourself back and celebrate that you brought yourself back to your breathing, that's one of the things he said really to focus on, is focus on, oh, hey, cool, I noticed that I drifted and I brought myself back, rather than, damn it, I drifted and I suck at this. So that really starts to associate those more positive chemicals, those more positive nerve pathways, those more positive feelings with meditation. So it's a way of reinforcing in a positive way, rather than going in with all of the it should and it would and I should be better at and those kind of things. So it is it's that kind of grace to allow yourself to be bad at it for a little bit and realize that you're not bad at it. are unpracticed, and it comes with time.
I think that's really great because during a meditation practice, that's what happens is the tapes start to play.
Mm-hmm.
And the tapes will play. They just will.
Right.
Whatever that come up, it might be tapes of your father saying something, your mother saying something, a teacher saying something, and the tapes come up. Sometimes they're quiet, sometimes they're loud, but part of meditation is just being aware and being observant as a witness that that's not who you are. You're just witnessing the tapes.
Mm-hmm.
And play around with the tapes if you're in meditation. Have a curiosity about, oh my gosh, my dad would think I'm so lazy just sitting here in meditation. So interesting, you know, and not have the judgments around it. So that first step absolutely is you got to be aware that it's even happening.
Right.
I like that. Just play around with that's kind of fun, actually. I'm gonna have to.
Oh yeah, right.
Sounds like yes.
Yeah, I am. I'm kind of excited for it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And then come back to the breath.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Celebrate coming back to the breath. Reward yourself.
Celebrate coming back to the breath. Yeah, yeah. I love it.
Is there any kind of wrap-up idea that you guys wanted to get across, like some little tidbit that you really think would be just a cornerstone of setting intention, keeping it forward, whether that be, or any one thing from this that you thought was particularly interesting you just want to make sure is front of mind?
Mm-hmm. Mine would be patient, be kind as you embark on the journey. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes. I would just say, just be.
Oh, look at you. Yeah. I love it.
Just be.
Just be.
Like, just be.
Tom's like, be what now? Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think my biggest takeaway every time I talk about intention, but particularly from this, is that it really does matter what you allow yourself to focus on. In many ways. I mean, whether you're talking about your energy, whether you're talking about behavior, whether you're talking about, in my case, a lot of physiology. I mean, I do bridge that for a lot of people because the more I focus, frankly, the more I learn about physiology, the more things like being body aware and things that most energy practices incorporate, they become very real. I mean, it just, the more I learn, the more it reinforces that a lot of these practices that are so ingrained in older cultures and ancient cultures for thousands of years that we just kind of sloughed off recently as kind of woo-woo or weird, these things are very real and they matter very much. And there's a lot that you can do to steer that and to take advantage of that and to really help yourself do whatever it is you set your intent to do.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Well, thanks for bringing us together, Dr. Tom.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I so honor and have gratitude and appreciate both of your gifts that you bring to the world. I'm honored to be on this, shall we call it, podcast Zoom meeting together. I feel pretty special with being here with you two.
Well, thank you for what you bring.
Chance to do it again. I'm excited. This makes me happy.
Yeah, this was fun.